Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to a vote we're going to be having very soon, the confirmation of Eric Miller to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. As a United States Senator, I take my obligations to advise and consent on judicial nominations very seriously. And Mr. Miller's confirmation process has, I believe, gone against longstanding Senate traditions, norms, and the role of advise and consent to his nomination. This nomination has proceeded over the objection of both myself and my colleague from Washington, Senator Murray. And for more than 100 years, this process of conferring with senators, allowing them to advise and consent on judicial nominees from their home state, has been our process. Since 1936, only 8 judges have been confirmed when one home state senator objected. And in every case, confirmed nominees have been supported by at least one senator from the states that has been nominated from. And to this day, no circuit court judge has ever been confirmed despite opposition from their home state senators. But all that would change with Mr. Miller if he is confirmed. His confirmation hearing was held during a recess last Congress when the vast majority of senators were back in their states. In fact, only 2 members of the United States Senate were present at the hearing, and neither one of them were Democrats. Mr. Miller was questioned for less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And when the Judiciary Committee Democrats requested another hearing, that request was rejected. So confirming Mr. Miller without a full vetting by both Democrats and Republicans is the wrong way to proceed on a lifetime appointment. Moreover, confirming Mr. Miller without approval from Senator Murray and I also continues to set a damaging precedent. I do have legitimate concerns about Eric Miller's nomination. He has spent much of his career fighting against the interests of tribal governments and tribal sovereignty. He has argued against opposing tribal fishing rights, challenging tribal sovereignty, fighting against the protection of Native American religious and traditional practices. So it is no surprise that over 573 tribal nations around the United States, including the National Congress of American Indians, opposed Mr. Miller's confirmation. So I urge my colleagues to stop this process and oppose the confirmation to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Mr. President, I also wanted to comment on today's action in the House, where they are supposed to take up S-47, the Murkowski-Cantwell lands package, which received 92 votes in the Senate earlier this month. It is my hope that the House will confirm with the same overwhelming vote that we did in the Senate and send this legislation quickly to President Trump's desk. I want to take a moment to emphasize 4 important provisions of this legislation as we ask the Forest Service to focus on this year's upcoming fire season. This legislation includes 4 provisions that will help firefighters improve their safety and effectiveness and bring state-of-the-art technology to combating wildfires. These provisions will help firefighters and communities, and we need to do everything we can as we see fire seasons extending and having more catastrophic events. We need to give communities and firefighters every tool possible. First, this legislation allows for the use of drones to create real-time fire mapping, and it allows for GPS to track firefighters and their crews. These advances will help enable real-time tracking and location of both the fire and the firefighters. Why is this so important? Because our firefighters need real-time data to do their job more safely and effectively. The combination of real-time mapping and GPS locators has been referred to by firefighters as, quote, the holy grail of wildland firefighting safety. Last month, reports on devastating Mendocino complex fire shows why this is the case. According to this report, one of the challenging frontline firefighters had to face was the fact that they weren't sure exactly where the fire was. The safety officers don't always know where the firefighters are. In one case, no one knew where 6 entrapped firefighters were. The result was all 6 suffered injuries because it took quite a while to locate and rescue them. Under this legislation that will be voted on by the House today, we will have more drones orbiting high over the fires, constantly updating fire maps, and doing it more than just once a day, which has been done now. These drones employ infrared cameras that can penetrate through thick smoke and better identify hot spots. Air tankers will be able to drop their fuel retardants, and we can tell firefighters on the front line how to steer away from areas that are just too dangerous to tackle. When I heard the stories of brave firefighters that battled the fire in complexes and have challenged us in many parts of my state, I knew that we needed to do more to protect these unbelievable heroes. Whether it is in eastern Washington or central Washington in the Okanagan and Wenatchee forests or around Spokane, we have to do more to help those communities and firefighters who are putting themselves on the line for us. This legislation also has improved technology in that it is using NASA's mapping access to help us prevent mudslides after we see these horrific fires. We all know that erosion can happen shortly after the devastation of vegetation and put more damage into a community. The fact that we will be getting NOAA access, we will be able to then come up with strategies to prevent erosion in real time, cutting the time significantly from where it is today. And the fourth provision is improving smoke forecasting by assigning meteorologists to every large fire. Now, I know some people are thinking that probably was already done. Believe me, we haven't given the Forest Service every tool that it needs. Over the last few summers in Puget Sound, we have suffered as regional wildland fires have blanketed our normally pristine air with clouds and smoke. And we know that this is becoming a new normal. As western United States continues to become hotter and drier, fires become more and more likely. And as the fuels get drier, the number of fires increase and get even bigger. This isn't just an eastern Washington problem. Our Washington Department of Natural Resources responded to 1,800 fires last year, and 40% of those were in western Washington. According to researchers at the University of Washington, by 20 years from now, we will see the average burn rate in the Northwest double from what we saw for the last 50 years. So we know that these challenges need more tools, and the legislation before us in the Senate that we have already passed in the Senate, but is before the House today, will provide these new technology and training tools to empower the Forest Service to help our communities and our firefighters. Real-time fire mapping, more drone technology to give us real-time information about the fires, using NASA satellite information to help us plan post-fires, and giving us more smoke forecasting information to better help our communities and deal with those who are impacted by heavy smoke. I hope our colleagues will act expeditiously on this legislation. We know that wildland fire funding, as we increased it in an agreement last year, was so important, but we need to keep working on this problem. I thank my colleague for Colorado for helping to sponsor this inclusion in the legislation and hope that the President will sign this legislation very quickly so the tools can be put in place for this upcoming fire season. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.